Um, Good afternoon. Today is September 1st, 2016. My name is Anna Newman, and I'm here at City Hall with Julius Breslouf. Together, we are participating in the Newton Talks Oral History Project that is being conducted with the Newton Free Library, Historic Newton, and the Newton Senior Center. So, Mr. Breslouf, what is your connection to Newton?
Well, I've lived here over 50 years. My children went to Newton High School, and I have my own house. That's about it. That's the connection.
So, what were you doing before you entered the service?
A pharmacist. The year I graduated pharmacy school was May or June of '53, and I was at home working in a drugstore until I was drafted in November of '53 for 2 years.
So, were you working in Newton?
No, I was working in Boston for several months before being drafted into the Army.
So, what was life like for you before you entered the service?
We're happy to be out of school. I was, when I got out of high school in '49, '53, so I was about 21, and still at home with my parents. I had a large family, 6 kids in my family. 5 of them were already married and away from the house. So I knew it was going to be my final summer before I was drafted, so just had a good time with friends and worked and was happy to pass the board and things like that.
So, what did you miss most about home aside from family and friends?
What did I miss the most?
During your service?
Oh, during the service, my 2 years of service. Nothing spectacular. I was overseas in Korea for 16 months. I had some training before going to Korea, and when the 16 months were served, I was sent back home to be discharged because I had done my term of service, and anybody having less than 90 days left from their draft, I was discharged in about 22 months instead of 24. And what was the question again?
So, what did you miss most about home while you were
I guess just homesick, seeing my family, my sisters and brothers, and a lot of my friends.
So, how did you join and why did you choose the specific branch that you were part of?
Well, I didn't join, I was drafted. So I was, I was out of college in 1953, and I knew that I would be drafted. We all, I think at that time, we knew we stood in a short period before being drafted, actually drafted, and I was ordered by letter, what I don't remember it. I had to go to New Jersey, and that's where I first started my service to the Army.
So, were you upset to be drafted, or were you just?
No, I was sort of rather happy to leave the house because all of my brothers were in the service prior to me, and a new adventure. The Korean War had stopped when I got over there. That there were no shooting or anything. They had stopped. The 38th parallel being north of that was the Korea that exists now, and the South Korea is where I spent all my 16 months.
So, what specific branch were you part of?
The Army.
Okay.
U.S. Army.
And how did you adapt to the Army life or the military life?
Very well, I would say. No problems. I thought I ended up in Korea for the 60 months, but before leaving the United States, we were told that we'd be landing in Japan, and we had served in Japan. There were a lot of U.S. forces in Japan. So, but it ended up, I did stay in Japan for a week or so when I was transferred to Korea.
And how did you adapt specifically to the physical regiment, the barracks, and food and social life?
Very well. I mean, I had a job in which to report to every morning. I was at the 6th Medical Depot, and we carried some medical supplies and whole human blood for people who might have an accident or that needed. There were a lot of evacuation hospitals, and I had a job. You know, it's like an 8 to 5 job, and there was a lot of time to play volleyball, and adjusting to the weather was very nice because it had a remind me of the weather back home, winter and summer. So I had no problems adjusting.
And where exactly did you serve? Do you remember arriving and what it was like when you got there?
Yes, there were a bunch of us. Oh, that's my dog. There were a bunch of us that were called out one morning from where I was in Japan, landing in Japan, and we were told, this 90 or so men were told, you're going to be advancing to Korea. And from where I was in Yokohama, there was a train that we boarded, these 100 servicemen that were going to go to Korea rather than staying in Japan. And we went by train to the southern part of Japan. Did I just say Suzanne? No, Busan. We landed. We left Korea. We left Japan from Sasebo overnight to Busan, Korea, the southern part of Korea. After landing there, there were 90 or 100 guys were called out to go to this place or this place, and I was called out to by a name call to be sent up to Yong Dong Po, Korea, near Seoul. So there was a driver there, and we fell out. When we say fell out, we went out, he followed him, and we were put in a car and taken to our final destination after being in Japan for a week, and then being displaced up to Busan and eventually Yong Dong Po, near Seoul, a small town underneath, south of the 38th parallel.
And how did you stay in touch with your family and friends during this time?
By mail. There was a sort of a tragic ending. Whether I was going to get a ship back home, but I was notified by some people in where I was stationed for 60 months that I was needed down to see someone at the Red Cross in Seoul, and I learned that my father died of a heart attack. So then, instead of being shipped over by ship, I was flown home to San Francisco, and then immediately I went home. I didn't get discharged for a couple of weeks. I went home, and I had the opportunity to go home. Then I went back down to where I was released. My 2 years were up, short of about a month or so.
Wow, yeah. So did you find the mail to be sufficient in staying in touch?
I had mail from my sisters. It was one sister and 4 brothers, and they all had families. And my parents were alone then. Everybody was gone from the house where we lived. And the mail was fine. Every week or something I had something in the mail from someone.
And so can you tell me about a few of your most memorable experiences, positive or negative?
While being there? nothing outstanding. I mean, there were. Oh, I do remember one thing that happened in the barracks that I was sleeping in. We had to pull duty every several days, 4 hours on, 4 off, and each night there was a call out for 7 men and a sergeant to walk the area of where this 6 medical depot was situated, and there was six or seven guys and one staff sergeant that we were guard duty once a week at least, or maybe sometimes 2 times a week. There would be someone called out for you wouldn't do your daily job, and they'd come up and wake us up to go on duty, whether it be 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning, I don't remember, but it was, you didn't sleep for not steady for 8 hours or so. But one of the men didn't report, he was drunk, and the staff sergeant pulled out his gun. Everybody was just in awe, but it ended that the guy got in trouble. I don't know what happened with him exactly. He wasn't ready for guard duty.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
But I remember the staff sergeant pulling out his gun. I don't know if that was.
No, yeah, that's awesome.
That's an experience.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But I was able to go back to Japan twice on leaves. 7 days. I went back to Tokyo twice in the 16 months I was there. I tried to go to Shanghai. A lot of people that were there who I had met, the thing was you could go to Shanghai, Tokyo, southern Japan, northern Japan, you would have your pick. But they stopped sending kids, guys, to Shanghai. So it was a nice not 2 weeks successively, a week, and then maybe 5 months later, another week, we had an opportunity to travel back to Japan, or northern Japan or southern Japan.
And do you recall the day your service ended?
I went in November of '53. Oh, it was in maybe October of '55 that I was discharged, but I don't remember the exact day. It would be on some papers that I have at home.
Was it a memorable day for you?
Yeah, not especially. I mean, I was happy to get back home. It was fun being in the service, really. Thought it was a great experience for myself.
And what was it like once you got home to return to civilian life?
Well, I was eager to find a job and see a lot of my friends who I grew up with. I lived in the West End near the Mass General Hospital, Cambridge Street. So I lived in that area, and it was a great area to grow up in. As I mentioned a minute ago, it was called the West End of Boston, and there was a camp I used to go to in the summer, and a lot of Irish kids, Italian kids, Jewish kids. It was just a potpourri of different heritage. So it was great to see all the guys, and then I started to go out with a young lady, and though I didn't marry her, it was someone else. So it was great homecoming, great. I was in good shape and ready to go on with my life.
So how did your service and experiences affect your life and your outlook on war and the military in general?
Well, I was lucky that when I got to this place, Yong Dong Po, Korea, up near Seoul, if you look at a map, that I heard some guys that were there when the shooting was the Korean War was 2 or 3 years before there was an armistice. So there was some real people dying, you know, and I thought of it that way, but I don't think I dwelled on it, you know. I knew that the shooting had stopped, and there was no trouble. Well, the 38th parallel still separated North and South Korea, and we had two men stay at this, they call it 38th parallel, and they were South Koreans on one side, North Koreans on the other. So I suppose there was always a chance of the war breaking out again. I mean, but nobody dwelled on it or anything.
So what would you like people to know 100 years from now about either war or your experiences in the Korean War?
Ask me that question again.
What would you like people to know 100 years from now?
Oh, I think in all respects that I was glad to serve my country. It was a good experience, and you know, that America would always be ready, you know, for whatever came or comes. So 100 years from now, they might be talking about Trump or something.
So do you have any other stories or comments you'd like to add?
No, not really. I mean, it was a nice experience that I had, and I appreciated it, and I was glad that I was able to be in the Army. I had 3 brothers in the Navy, but
Oh, wow.
I never made it. Well, I got drafted into the Army before I enlisted. I could have enlisted into the Navy.
So thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Yeah, we really appreciate to be able to include you in the Newton Talks Oral History Project.
Oh, we're all set?
All set.
Oh, okay. Very good. So how am I going to get this again? Jenny, you listen to this?
Well, we'll send you a CD
Oh, okay.
at some point. It might be a little while on that.
Oh, all right.
But we will have it up on YouTube, and the pictures that I